Happy Friday, everyone. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Lee Ji-yoon. Coming up on today's edition of Business Daily. The big day over in the U.S. is quickly approaching with the two presidential candidates in the final stretch of their campaigning. And we tell you what you should look for in next week's election. Korea's catering companies are focused on providing improved food services as the industry continues to see growth over the past 3 years. These stories and more coming right up. A port in China has seized another of Hanjin Shipping's container ships because of unpaid terminal fees of $875,000, bringing the tally of seized Hanjin ships to 5. The vessel in question, the Hanjin China, has successfully offloaded all of its cargo in Shanghai and was planning to head back to Busan. The terms of seizure require that 6 to 12 crew members stay on board for vessel maintenance until the terminal fees are paid. While Hanjin can rotate the crew, it's planning to auction some of its seized vessels to raise the money. But first, Hanjin will have to get legal permission on whether it can auction off its vessels, and that won't come until early next year. The company was put under court receivership in September and had debt worth $5.5 billion as of the end of June. Crude oil prices extended their losing streak into a fifth day, with West Texas Intermediate for December delivery shedding 1.5% to settle under $45 a barrel. That's the lowest close in 6 weeks. The drop comes a day after reports of a record surge in U.S. crude inventories further stoked concerns about a global supply glut. The U.S. Energy Information Administration reported that the weekly build jumped by over 14 million barrels, the biggest gain since records were kept in 1982. Investors also remain skeptical over OPEC's planned production limit. Oil ministers from OPEC will meet at the end of the month to try and agree on a production cap to stem the global oversupply and boost oil prices. And moving on to markets, to give us a wrap-up of this week's stock market action, we have our Business Daily's markets contributor, Choi Jin-seok, joining us on the phone today. Hello, Jin-seok.
Thanks for having me.
All right, so as we close the week, how was the last day of trading?
On Friday, the Kospi market fluctuated throughout the session, closing at 1982.02, down 0.09% compared to the previous session. Despite stock buying by both retail and institutional investors, foreigners who unloaded massive amounts of shares dragged down the index during this session. President Park Geun-hye's televised second apology somewhat helped lift investor sentiment, but the so-called 최순실 scandal continued to spook the market during the session. The Kosdaq market opened with a slight uptick on Friday, but the index fell into negative territory in early hours, mainly due to the sell-off by foreigners and institutional investors. It later recovered to positive territory, closing at 610.82, up 0.1% compared to the previous session. The internet sector that enjoyed an almost 2% intraday rally helped lift the entire index.
And like you just mentioned, the Korean equity market had been weighed down by domestic political risks throughout the week. So how's the overall market performance this week?
Right. On a weekly basis, both the Kospi and the Kosdaq fell sharply. The Kospi dropped by almost 2%, while the Kosdaq plummeted by more than 4% compared to last week. By size, small-cap stocks, which fell by more than 3%, continued to underperform against large to mid-cap stocks. As we mentioned, domestic political risks spooked sentiment, particularly among foreign investors. Foreigners and retail investors unloaded shares on a weekly basis, while institutions bought shares. Uncertainty surrounding the upcoming U.S. presidential election served as a negative catalyst, too.
Now, political risks both at home and abroad have been dominant market factors. So what should investors focus on next week?
Experts advise investors to be prudent before the results of the U.S. election come out. In particular, we can't rule out the possibility of Donald Trump being elected now, so investors should brace for heightened volatility after the results as well. After the election, major market events including the OPEC meeting and the December FOMC will be closely watched, which is why it's hard to expect foreigners placing investments in the market anytime soon. This has been Choi Jin-seok for Business Daily.
For a cheap, accessible meal, office cafeterias have always been an easy option. Steady demand has led to greater competition in the market, prompting catering companies to look for new tastes and quality dishes. Our Arirang has more.
These chefs are cooking up a storm at this contest hosted by catering service firm Our Home. Teamed up with nutritionists, the chefs are competing to see who can come up with the most creative meal that can be served to client cafeterias nationwide.
I used to put on specialties like rice wine makgeolli, dubu and grapes to help globalize this regional rib dish.
According to Statistics Korea, the country's catering industry has been growing every year since 2013, from about $3.3 billion to $3.7 billion last year. Given the already saturated market, companies agree that the key to more growth lies in higher quality and the ability to stand out. For one, Korea's largest catering company, Samsung Wellstory, has partnered up with famous restaurants in Seoul to serve popular dishes to over 100 cafeterias nationwide. Our Home has introduced an automated sorting system for ingredients to push up its efficiency in delivery by over 30%.
The system is to facilitate a more stable supply in the greater metropolitan area that's seeing a surge in orders.
Recognizing the limited room for growth domestically, firms are increasingly turning their eyes abroad. Samsung Wellstory has been supplying a combined 300,000 meals daily to cafeterias in China and Vietnam, seeing over $62 million in sales. CJ Freshway and Hyundai Green Food also posted around $14 and $12 million in sales respectively from their overseas businesses. Experts say this expansion is essential and that companies should further strengthen their competitiveness by developing distinctive menus to suit local tastes. Lee Ju-young, Business Daily.
It's Friday, and today we're going to focus our global section on the U.S. presidential election that's now just 4 days away. And our Eunice Kim joins us at the touchscreen today. Hello?
Hello.
All right, so Eunice, we're nearing the moment of truth, and throughout this week we saw some investor jitters in a form of pretty heavy volatility.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. We are in the final stretch now in that race between Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump, and those jitters pronounced as we saw their gap narrow in the polls after FBI Director James Comey brought Clinton's email issue back into the national dialogue. Now, here's what's called the Fear Index, or VIX. At the end of the Asian trading day on Wednesday, it shot up over the 20-point mark to a 2.5-week high. Analysts say it's the market caught off guard, having not priced in a potential Trump presidency. Now, safe haven gold also saw a regaining its momentum, as did the Japanese yen against the greenback, as well as the Mexican peso falling, as you see there.
So the world has been watching this particular race very closely, as it has been no ordinary race. So how are we looking right now, and what should we be looking for next week?
So what's going to matter at the end of the day is electoral votes, not popular votes. And there are 538 electors split up like this throughout the 50 states plus Washington, D.C. Now, it takes 270 to win the U.S. presidency. And as you can see, Hillary Clinton has the support of the states with large cities like New York and California, while Donald Trump's support is strongest along the Bible Belt, reminiscent of the demographics we saw back in June. Now, in the Brexit referendum, Londoners strongly supported remaining in the EU, but it was folks living in the outskirts who really pushed that tight vote over. Battleground states Americans will be watching include Florida, North Carolina, Arizona, Nevada, and Utah, to name a few. And crucially, Trump will have to take a blue state from Hillary to take him to 270.
And of course, this is a race that's very important to Korea as well, considering what Trump has said during his campaign about Korea if he becomes president, with one of them being letting the peninsula go nuclear and also making Korea pay more for U.S. troops present in Korea, as well as potentially revising the Chorus FTA.
Right, which all could have deep ramifications for the geopolitics of the region. In fact, Moody's analysts recently called this October race one of the most immediate event risks for the global economy, as a change in U.S. policy stance could contribute to a weakening of global trade and security architecture. Now, I spoke with a longtime Korea resident and Professor Robert Kelly to delve into this further. Take a look.
For many in Korea and Asia at large, the choice has been clear. A Win Gallup poll of 44,000 people across 45 countries has shown overwhelming support for Hillary Clinton. Among Koreans polled, more than 8 in 10 supported the former Secretary of State.
Trump has said we should pay more for the U.S. armed forces in South Korea and renegotiate the free trade deal. If that happened, it could be really bad for Korea. That's why I think Hillary is better for us.
Political scientist and longtime Korea resident Robert Kelly agrees.
I think the answer is almost certainly Hillary Clinton. Donald Trump is so erratic, he's so unpredictable. I think that Donald Trump would be terrible for almost all of America's foreign relationships and partnerships, Korea included. Well, Hillary represents in many ways the status quo.
Kelly points out, despite having publicly stepped aside from the TPP trade deal that she once vouched for, Hillary Clinton, during a debate, had explicitly said she would stand by the American security guarantee if she becomes president.
Which is fairly remarkable. I mean, that's a pretty direct declaration that things wouldn't change under her administration.
Donald Trump has made some big promises, including bringing jobs back to the U.S. On his website, his campaign claims that a trade deal with Korea has not only, quote, killed nearly 100,000 jobs, but America's trade deficit with Korea has more than doubled, too. But many economists point out much of the millions of manufacturing jobs lost since 2000 were the victims of technology and the new lifestyles that it brings.
Even if Trump provokes these kinds of trade wars, I'm not really sure that he can actually get back these jobs that are required. I mean, the real issue is that the United States is a high-income economy. Low-tech jobs will leave a high-income economy like the United States. This is also happening in Korea, right? And they go where it's cheaper.
This demographic of unemployed blue-collar workers in the States has been growing for the past 30 to 40 years. Kelly says a watershed moment in inflaming distrust of the elite was the 2007 housing bubble, which left many jobless and homeless with wrecked credit.
I would say probably the single biggest thing that could probably convince people that global economic integration is good would be a reduction in inequality. So what you need then is sort of greater rule of law, thicker democratization, right? A genuine concern about equality, more progressive taxation, things like that.
All right, so President Clinton or President Trump will have to brace for it next week. But whoever becomes the next president, they will have a very big task at hand, especially in addressing inequality.
Right. Inequality is definitely a theme that has resonated in this campaign cycle, but it's not just the disenfranchised. This week, PayPal co-founder Peter Thiel told reporters he was voting for Donald Trump to make a statement about the current leadership.
Now, I don't agree with everything Donald Trump has said and done, and I don't think the millions of other people voting for him do either. Nobody thinks his comments about women were acceptable. I agree, they were clearly offensive and inappropriate. But I don't think the voters pull the lever in order to endorse a candidate's flaws. It's not a lack of judgment that leads Americans to vote for Trump. We're voting for Trump because we judge the leadership of our country to have failed.
Food for thought. One thing's for sure, both Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton will be campaigning hard through the weekend to become that president that decides for the next 4 years.
Well, I'm definitely looking forward to that race next week. Thank you so much for all that today.
You bet.
And that wraps it up for today and this week. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll be back next week with more business news that matters to you. Until then, goodbye.